Welcome to Coffee Conversations with Les and Paul, Revelation Edition.
A podcast sponsored by Piedmont Road Church of Christ and Ministry League.
We're here to discuss the book of Revelation, just as if we were asking Jesus himself. I am Paul Sperlin.
And I am Les Sandifer. We hope you will enjoy our relaxed Bible-based discussions.
Thanks for joining us as we think about and talk about all those things we'd ask Jesus over a cup of coffee. All those things.
Oh. I like the way you drew that out.
Thank you.
By the way, I almost said something in our intro that would have thrown you completely off.
What's that?
I'm wearing our sponsorship today.
You are literally.
Both sponsorships today.
You are? Oh, are you? Are you? That's cool.
I got a little Ministry League under here.
And a little PR
over the top.
Quarter zip. Look sharp, man.
There's no subliminal message to that. It's just both of them are on.
Since you said that,
yes,
let's introduce and talk about our good sponsors.
Yep.
Piedmont Road Church of Christ, located in Marietta, Georgia, 1630 Piedmont Road, Marietta, Georgia. Website is Life in Christ, capital the C in Christ, always.
.com.
Lifeinchrist.com. And also Ministry League at ministryleague.com. So check those out. You can find this and many other podcasts right there at Ministry League. Also on the website for Piedmont Road and Ministry League, all there, and a lot of other things and all the resources as well. So thank you for that. If you have a question, comment, anything you need from us, please send us an email at coffeeconvo@lifeinchrist.com.
That's right.
So send us some messages, send us stuff, talk to us, let us hear from you. And we will get back to you on that. 2 shows. The other one is Coffee Conversations. It's a 30-minute show we do each week. Go back over there and find that. And this show, which is the Revelation edition.
Yep.
We are at, I believe, episode 14, which...
wow.
Nope.
That's crazy.
It's episode 13. It's episode 13. I was looking ahead.
There's a lot of them, though.
There is 13, and we're only in chapter 6. But we will spend some time here and hopefully get you some good stuff each week for that.
We start to get into some of the fun stuff.
We do. Also, keep in mind,
it's almost anticlimactic though when we get to it.
Why do you say that? It's very climactic.
It is, but it's not what people want it to be.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they hear what the world says about
the phantasm of it all.
Oh, the Four Horsemen of the apocalypse.
Oh, let's go.
And the worldview of apocalypse is the end of the world and doom and things blowing up and whatever they envision that to be. But
right.
Yeah, that's not what these Four Horsemen are all about. So
that's true. It's a
different thing.
It is. And as you're listening to this, we hope you're enjoying your turkey and your dressing.
Yes,
because it is about to become. That'll be next week.
Yeah, but it's on the cusp.
It is. It's right here.
It's right around the corner. Very exciting stuff.
Really are.
Do you like Thanksgiving?
I do.
As a holiday?
I like the fellowship. I like the dressing. I'm a dressing guy.
Turkey on Thanksgiving, ham on Christmas?
Yeah,
is that the way you roll?
That's kind of how it goes. Yeah.
All right.
I like good turkey, but I like the dark meat.
Yeah.
I'm the dark meat guy.
Fried turkey?
I'd go there. Yeah. That'd be different.
If it's done right.
Yeah.
Both of them are great if they're done,
But dressing has to also be done right.
It's
because
true.
Some people can put too much sage in there, and I'm out.
And you're done.
I'm done.
You're gone.
But my wife,
I didn't know you were sagey.
I'm not a sagey.
You're non-sagey.
I'm non-sagey.
You're anti-sage.
Stephanie and Beverly Sperlin, my mom, do the best. And my grandmother,
okay,
Hilda Sperlin, did great with that.
Yeah, put me a scoop in a Tupperware and let me
we'll have some
let me
here.
do a taste test.
We'll have
I
some
won't
here,
be here
on
probably.
Thanksgiving Day. I'll put it in there.
No,
I'll save
I'm
you some.
sorry.
Yeah. Thanksgiving Day right here, 4 o'clock, Piedmont Road. If you need Thanksgiving dinner, come on up.
I want to hang out with
love to have you.
Some good folks.
Meet the celebrities. Meet the folks that
make it all happen.
That make it all happen. For sure.
Behind the microphone.
It's good people.
I've been fighting allergies for 2 weeks, and every time I laugh, I have this like weird growl in it. Yeah, and it's strange to hear it. I hear the laugh, and I'm like, who are you? When did you start smoking prolifically?
Do you listen to the show? Do you go back and listen to the show?
Sometimes.
Yeah, I do.
Sometimes I'll go back and listen. I'm not a fan of hearing my voice.
I feel like we sound different recording than we are when I go back and listen to it.
That's the problem.
That's not how I sound.
No.
But
everybody's like that, by the way, though.
are they?
They hear themselves record and go, I sound like that?
Gotcha.
Stop recording me.
I know.
Something like that.
We're almost a month away from Exposure Youth Camp, too, by the way.
Yeah, it's closing in.
If you don't know about it, EYC.camp. Check it out.
.camp.
Yeah,
Okay.
EYC.camp. Yeah, big event. Almost 3,000 in Huntsville.
Yep.
People from all over the United States, so we're excited about that.
Are we avoiding talking about the Four Horsemen?
No, I think we should jump right into it.
Because it's
very
tough.
exciting. Let's do it.
This is one of those that
It's not what you think it is.
You can jump down a rabbit hole in a hurry. In a hurry.
Let's see. So we've been here. I want to document this at least 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah,
At least 3.
No, that's true.
We've talked about this
And we've read some commentary
and we've read
stuff.
commentaries. We've dealt with some church issues. I mean, we got so much going on this morning, but yeah, it just
So normally we read through it and then kind of talk through it. Let's kind of back up and just high level for just a second.
yes.
One of the things we talked about, and I'm going to reiterate it, we've talked about it in class.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be careful when you look at commentaries to let them define how you see
True.
anything really Bible related, because the Bible is the Bible.
That's true.
And you have to be able to look at it contextually and come away with. Now, some of this is a little trickier in Revelation. I will get it because of the nature of the type of language used.
Exactly.
So there is a commentary that's pretty widely known within the Brotherhood.
Okay.
It's available online at studylight.org.
Oh,
I
okay.
use it myself quite a bit.
Okay.
Burton Kaufman. I will tell the listener, we'll tell our class the same thing. I adamantly disagree with his point of view when it comes to this particular book.
I am so glad to hear you say that.
Or these verses in this chapter, more specifically, the white horse.
Exactly.
That's
where I'm
that's
going.
the piece where I take exception to what he said, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. For those that may come back and reference this later, or if you're in a position where you can take notes, an interesting cross reference to understand again that they've seen this language before. Zechariah, inspirationally, Zechariah chapter 6 verses 1 through 8.
Yes.
Just like we're in chapter 6 of Revelation,
That's
verses
true.
1 through 8.
It's a good place to start.
Zechariah 6, chapter 6, verses 1 through 8.
Right.
You will find some very, very similar imagery.
Absolutely.
We're not going to read through it, but just know that it's there because it talks about 4 groups of horses. They're all 4 colored. They're red, black, white, and dappled.
Or was it 3?
They have 4.
Okay.
I thought it was 3 originally when we went and looked at it, but
they got
there's
the chariots to go with them.
But they have chariots.
Right.
Yeah. But, same kind of idea, covers similar messaging.
No chariots in heaven. Just so you know.
There's no chariots in this vision of heaven. That's right. The horse just comes riding in with a rider. So with that backdrop, and it's important because they've seen this language before, not new language. This is not breaking new ground. One other thing that we talked about before we came on air has to do with the scroll. So now we're seeing the seals broken on the scroll. The scroll's opening to us information.
Right. And we may have mentioned this when this first started.
Yeah.
About the seals. I know we did in class.
Yep.
But for this benefit, if you see our logo for this show, if you've seen an earlier one, I'm not sure. Well, the new one might have it on there too.
I don't remember.
I got a letter. So we work with Exposure Youth Camp, and we're on the board, and we do different things, and we get the when people send their checks, that they send us a letter, and so sometimes I get a note. Well, I saw this one day, and this letter came through, and it felt like plastic on the back of it.
Oh.
And I turned it over, and I'm like, oh, that's legit.
It had a seal.
It had a seal, and his last name was Parker, so there's a big P on it. It's kind of interesting. And
Was
I thought,
it
I need that.
Was it like a
Paul.
raised embossed sticker?
Oh, I mean, he pushed it to it and did its thing.
Oh.
So this is like a rubbery initial on a way
That's
to
old school.
to stop the envelope from being able to be opened.
Yeah, and if
so
it has been,
you're done. It's been open, and it's you got to do something. Exactly, it was sealed.
Yeah,
this is exactly the same looking thing that we're talking about. So don't think we're creating something that's not here, or because I told you before. Yeah. When I say a seal, I think of like the seal on like a CIA or FBI floor.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, you got to take a big hammer and break the seal. That's not what we're talking about.
No.
We're literally talking about the scroll, a literal rounded scroll, envelope-ish, that only Jesus, only the Lamb could open.
And probably, vision-wise, these are not literal, but vision-wise, the seal was probably of the time era, which was probably some kind of waxy material that had been, an insignia had been sealed in it, whatever that insignia looks like, just from a visual point of view.
Right. We just want you to know what it is and what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we'll just say things, and we think people understand, and that's where there seems like there was something else too, but we'll get to it later, I guess, because I can't think of what it is right now.
Maybe it'll hit you as well.
Yeah.
Chapter 6, verse 1. Now I, John, watched when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals. So back to that same concept, we've got John.
Do not forget.
The Apostle John.
That John is looking through the doorway of heaven.
That's right. And he's seeing this vision of things that are happening.
It's his depiction.
He saw God on the throne. He saw the Lamb taking the scroll out of the hand of God.
Taken into the throne room.
That visualization of the hand open with the scroll, and John takes it. And now we're seeing him open the seals in sequence, right?
Right.
And I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come." Some of your translations may say, "Come and see." And then verse 2, and I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. So we'll start with this white horse concept. Just quick side note that I had mentioned to Paul off air, this representation, this visualization of a bow and a crown, in the time period that we're existing in here, it was well known. Not the Bible doesn't say this, but if you read some other back information from some other religious writers, Parthian horsemen were depicted this way visually, with a bow and a crown. And Parthia was a conquering nation that Rome would end up fighting with a lot. So it was a nation that was known at the time. It was a nation that Rome would have fights with, which plays into the whole imagery here of what they're seeing.
And I don't think we're talking about a crown like a king or queen would wear.
No, there's different
types.
It's
more of a wreath of victory.
Yes, this is a military.
It's about war.
That's right.
It's about battle.
It's about fighting.
And that's the kind of conquest we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's where some of the confusion comes in, because a lot of folks think, it's a white horse, it's got to be Jesus.
Yep.
No, it doesn't, because Jesus is going to raise a bow to go kill somebody.
Yeah, so later in Revelation, I think it's chapter 19, I believe it is.
Correct.
We do see Jesus depicted this way.
It's a different kind of horse. It's a different kind of situation.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where people go, "Oh, well, that's over there, so this must be it."
Absolutely.
This is where I step off the Burton Kaufman train, because Burton Kaufman is adamant. And if you go read his commentary on this particular chapter,
You're gonna say, "Dude, why?"
Yeah, I do. I read it. So here's the challenge.
Not you, but him.
Yeah, and here's the challenge with commentaries, because he hangs his hat entirely on an analysis by another human being, which is fine. We do that a lot, because we're trying to understand something. But we have to put it all in its context. And I have 2 very specific reasons I don't agree with him.
Okay.
One of those is because I'm not aware of any Bible description of Jesus as a conqueror where it's a physical battle confrontation. Jesus is always depicted as fighting with the sword of his mouth. Spiritual things.
That's Jesus.
And I get it. This is a vision, but Jesus is never depicted in Scripture that I'm aware of as conquering in this way.
Right.
The second reason is because it seems out of context with what the horsemen are intended to represent. We see a representation here of man and man's continual need to conquer, to overcome, to take things, to have things. In fact, that's just, if you look at it, well, I think I mentioned this to you. We had 2 other commentaries that refer to these 8 verses as the cycle of man's vanity or history's pageant of suffering. just this continual cycle man stays in of creating hardship within himself because of his inherent sinful desires.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying.
Okay, I'm off my mini soapbox. I just had to say the white horse to me is clearly just it's part of the sinful nature of man to want to conquer.
Well, by the way,
have.
And don't forget, and we've said this a couple of times in the duration of this show and this topic, we're still communicating life to these 7 churches.
True.
I mean, we're still communicating what this is, and John is relaying what that is, so they get an idea of what heaven looks like.
Yep.
So please understand it. It's John's communication to them about what's happening here. So don't forget, that's the essence of all of Revelation for those churches, but also for this church.
That's
for
right.
His church.
And one of the other things we talked about was this concept that one of the things we need to we talked about it in class, but maybe we didn't overemphasize it. But it's that what we're seeing here is not new information.
Correct.
What we're really getting is a representation of things that they have already been experiencing, will continue to experience as time marches on. So it's not as if John is seeing a vision that's enlightening them to things they've never experienced before. It's really an emphasis of the things that go on around us.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the world around you, these 8 verses in the first part of chapter 6, it's the world.
Right.
We've seen it before. You name anybody
Absolutely
you
true.
can think of, any nation you can think of in history, and somebody's probably pointed a finger at that nation and said, oh, that's what Revelation 6 was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That's who that is.
Right.
And the truth is, it's not. It's just all of them. It's none of them and all of them at the same time.
Yeah, there's a few things here I think that also lends itself towards there's no way this is Jesus, because he does appear riding on a white horse. We talked about that in chapter 19.
Yep.
But also he had a bow in his hand. I mean, he is convicted to destroy people physically, and Jesus is not about the physical. He's all about the spiritual.
And when you say he, you mean in this case the rider of this white horse has the bow. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also, if you think about it, it's kind of interesting. Just if you do a little history from the first century all the way through to even through Civil War and other conflicts, the white horse was refused in battle. The white horse was refused in battle because it marks a high-level soldier.
Yep.
So why in the world would Jesus put himself in a position to be a target?
So some of the confusion...
The point is, it's not a physical battle.
That's right. And some of the confusion probably comes from Revelation 19.
Right.
And a limited contextual understanding. Because what it says in 19 is... I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war.
Right.
Therein lies, people stop there and they go, oh, well, it's the same white horse because this one's making war as well. However,
it's a different kind of war.
It says specifically, from his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. Jesus does not do it in physical battle.
That's right.
He does it through his word.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the distinction in Revelation 19. We'll get to that somewhere down the road.
Part of the issue is they love people in general, love studying about the churches.
Yes.
And then they love going to chapter 19 right after that. And you're missing all the symbolism.
That's right.
Which we're having to tell you is only symbolism. If John would just keep his eyes shut, none of this would be an issue. But he opened them up and he looked at it. There we are.
Well, and I will agree with Burton Kaufman on one thing. The proper understanding of the white horse lends itself to a proper understanding of the rest of them. Mm-hmm. That's the only place I kind of agree with him here in this. And I don't want to make that too harsh because I think I do refer to his commentaries a lot just to help me have some further knowledge of, various scriptures because he's done a lot of research on them. Mm-hmm. But everything has to be put in the context of your own understanding of what God's word is saying. And we've spent a lot of time on that verse too, and this white horse.
We got more to do.
Yeah, now we'll talk about the other, and I'll just, if you're okay with it, I'll just go ahead and read the other 3 horses.
Oh, you're going to read them all together?
Or do you want to stop on each one? We can stop on each one.
I don't care.
I'm good.
No, you're right. Let's go.
Well, that way we can just back up to what each
right.
one represents.
Let's do it.
Verse 3, when he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine." When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death. And Hades followed him, and they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword and famine and with pestilence and by wild beasts of the earth. So now we have the 4 horses, the 4 horsemen played out before us,
Right.
starting with the conqueror, the white one, and moving into this red one that's allowed to take peace. So
representative of violent bloodshed.
Yeah, so now we have the conqueror that shows up on the scene.
Which means the second seal is broken.
Yeah, the second seal is broken. The third one's broken, and we have, as Paul said, the violent conquest, the war that follows man's natural need to conquer, the greed that goes with the nature of a lot of humanity. And then the third seal, the natural thing that follows war. And if you do a little study of history, this is not hard to understand. The natural thing that follows war is suffering. Yeah.
So the color, when you look at, as I said, the second seal is broken. Getting back to the red horse.
Yep.
So bright red represents the color of blood. And this horseman is given the power to take peace from the earth and to slay each other. Slay is a word that is takes the part of violent. It means violent. I mean, so battlefield.
And it's interesting because we immediately see from chapter 5 to chapter 6, we immediately see a complete differentiation in the imagery and what that imagery represents, right?
Yeah.
So we go from blood being good when the lamb was slain, and that blood represented something very powerful, very good. It cleansed us. Now we see what it means on the other side when humanity's involved, and it paints a different picture.
Right.
And we have to be able to differentiate between those two things from a vision point of view and what Jesus is trying to tell us. And I don't think I don't think it's coincidental.
No.
That
it's
Jesus tells us first,
yeah,
I'm the lamb, I was slain, my blood cleansed you.
Good point.
And then to flip in the next one and say, however, I own this process. Mankind does a completely different thing.
Right.
And when mankind turns on itself, that blood that's shed takes peace out of the earth. I bring it. This takes it away.
So we have the symbolism that is a really neat, it's not a parallel, but it's kind of continues the story here.
Yeah.
We go from 4 creatures a couple of chapters ago to the 4 creatures of chapter 6.
Yeah. And
the first ones
are good.
They're
That's
fine.
right.
It's like it's humanity.
That's right.
It represents humanity.
True, not good or bad, just
not good
representation.
Or bad. It's just who the people are.
Great point.
Different areas of people.
Yep.
And then now we have the 4 horsemen who represent the conflict that the first 4 have to deal with.
Yeah.
Now, as John is looking through the doorway of heaven, what he sees, please don't misunderstand this. Please follow this. This is John seeing something. He sees a conflict sent from heaven, not heaven, but sent from what John sees down to the humanity of earth, and they're having to deal with that.
Yep.
And so we want to make sure you understand as the story unfolds, because it's a story all the way, a real true story.
That's right.
That John sees.
Oh, I have a comment about that.
That goes with
Remind me later. I'll tell you about the story.
I'll forget. No, time out.
We'll tell it on here.
Okay, go ahead.
Because
I don't want you to miss it.
Charlotte and I were watching something, and I don't remember what it was, but she talked about a story, and the context in which she used the word was exactly what you're concerned about. because she used the word story in a context of I'm going to tell you something that isn't inherently true.
Okay.
Which Paul has brought this up in classes before, that we need to be careful with that from a Bible perspective, because they're not just made up stories. These are
fables.
These are truths.
Child story, yeah.
So when we use the word story in the context of the Bible, we're not implying that it's not. This is real.
Yeah, real people, real situations.
Real situations.
It really happened.
So the Truth for Today commentary on Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 through 8, draws these three conclusions, and it's probably interesting just to note these. What can we learn from the horsemen? That the future will always have tragedy. The past had it, we live in it, and the future will always have it. We live in a sinful world. Even if we are faithful, we will face trials. So those are three compelling things to understand, that, as you put it, these are people living out a sinful type of existence that we see around us all the time.
Right.
That's kind of what these horsemen represent, and that's what we can take away from it. That we just live. They declare the way the phrase went in the commentary was, they declare the difficulty of being a faithful Christian. That takes us back to the 7 churches.
Well, that's true.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, we can bring them back into this discussion and say, what were they challenged with? Well, they're challenged with what Rome is trying to do.
Which is exactly why they're the audience to this.
That's exactly why they're the audience. They're living in the moment with Rome.
That's right.
Rome is doing exactly what these horsemen represent.
Yeah.
They're not the first to have done it, because they're the 4th kingdom we saw from Daniel. They're not the first to have done it. These people have experienced this before. Jesus is not saying this is a new thing. This is what humans do to one another.
Yeah.
So in that, we talked about the red horse, and then we move into this black horse, where black is a color for grief and mourning in general. And now we're in this world of. Now we're talking about. He uses the phrase, a pair of scales in his hand. And really, some of this imagery is just to represent that now we're in this world of suffering that comes from war, where you're having to measure out the things you can buy because there's not a lot of stuff there.
You said it, that this depicted that, but I want to make sure they understand when we say scales, it is something that weighs stuff, which brought in the money amounts and things like that, of the denarii,
Probably
whatever.
Yeah, and we've seen it in pictures, but and since we're.
Because when Paul was blinded, he was covered in scales on his eyes.
Oh, great point.
Different.
Great point.
Different situation.
Different thing.
That's like 2 and 2. It's different things.
Yeah. Now, why he had a pair of scales, I don't know if that means literally the visual is that there's a scale with one thing on each side, if that's what a pair means.
Living by the way of the scale.
That's exactly what when I see it, I see what we see as a measuring scale, which has 2 scales.
2 sides.
One on each side.
The good side, the bad side. Sometimes.
Maybe that isn't entirely what he meant, but that's what it feels like to me.
Sermon reference, I'm sorry.
Just a side note, the pricing that's shown in here, I think it was Truth for Day, said these numbers are probably 8 to 18 times what a normal cost would be for this stuff. Really just kind of representing the same concept. And if you've done your history study, when a nation goes through, or people go through a time of suffering, things get hard.
Yeah, like a shortage of food, of grain can be rationed. That's kind of what this is for.
That's
for sure.
exactly right.
Like, because famine, that's what you think of when you think of the black
and really backing up to
horse here.
Really the greater picture of this is that they're going through suffering.
Right.
Because they're going through suffering because of the nature of man I keep saying the nature of man, but really because of how humanity treats one another. You can take this all the way down to the individual level.
Right.
This isn't just nations against nations. You think about how individuals treat one another, and you create this idea of conquering, and then you create this conflict between 2 people.
Right.
And then invariably somebody suffers when that conflict exists.
And it's just a different kind of suffering.
It's just different.
It's a different kind of conflict, but it's something that humanity has to deal with, which kind of goes back to what I said earlier.
And then ultimately, the outcome of a lot of this is death. Suffering that leads...
Entering into the 4th rider.
To that pale horse, some translated as green, some ashen.
Grayish.
You get all sorts of variations on what that coloring looks like.
Right.
Most people try to make it a greenish color. Probably, I really don't know why, because Zechariah uses a different word entirely for this horse.
Like the color of a corpse.
Oh,
that's what we're looking at.
Oh yeah, that's a great visual.
That's what we're looking at.
And really, there's not a lot
behind
to be
the Ride of the Trails, Hades. So it's kind of interesting there.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say probably not a lot to be. We shouldn't get too lost in they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with blah 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 blah. You know, these are just images to represent
what's occurred.
That this situation leads to death, and you can look at human history, and you're not going to have any problem finding it. The outcome of a lot of this suffering leads to death.
Right.
What were the churches told? You're going to suffer, and some of you may be killed as part of this suffering, but your home is in heaven.
Right.
It's not here. Which, ironically, transitions us perfectly to the fifth seal, because guess who the fifth seal's about? The fifth seal's about the faithful.
The good ones.
Yeah. Are we good on the horses?
I think so. I think we've covered it pretty well.
Yeah, we stayed on the white horse a good bit, but it's important because it sets the stage for really the rest of it. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. And they cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. That is the fifth seal. A footnote, I can tell you I hadn't researched this, but it defines those who has been slain as martyrs, which is legit. But it says at the time of this writing, that included Paul, Luke, Timothy, and all of the apostles except John had been slain at this point.
Right.
I have not researched that. I saw that footnote in the commentary, and I thought, that's very interesting and powerful. So if we date the writing of this into the late 90s, maybe you could historically go back and see through some other writings when Paul, Luke, Timothy, and the apostles were variously killed for their faith.
Yeah.
Whoever it includes, when it opens with the under the altar, some people ask the question about under the altar, probably a reference to how the priests dealt with the blood of the sacrificed animal, because it was poured at the base of the altar.
Okay.
So probably that phrasing probably just, again, a visual tie to the Old Testament idea of sacrifice.
Right.
But anyway, any thoughts on the fifth seal?
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
I think instead of a horse, you're talking about what's happening underneath the altar. So,
yeah, I think and while we move away from the images of why the four horses were depicted in that way, I don't know.
Yeah,
Zechariah talked about horses with chariots.
It's true,
but I mean, similar imagery. But yeah, when it's all said and done, the fifth seal is pretty straightforward.
And by the way, what Zechariah talked about there, I don't think that was there by accident.
No,
we're not talking about two different things.
No,
yeah, we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, we're talking.
This goes right back to Old Testament concealed as New Testament revealed.
Exactly.
I mean, and please keep that in mind. We'll say that a lot.
Yep.
On whatever show we're doing, because that's just prophetic scripture.
That's just the nature of it.
It is. It's poetry in motion.
Yep.
And thank God and the Holy Spirit for giving it to us.
Yeah, I guess a couple of other things maybe with the fifth seal, just to make note of. It's interesting that you hear the voices of those that had been slain crying out, "How long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" Not an uncommon concept from those that are hurting, right? We saw Job do it. We saw Job cry out to God, not because he didn't have faith in God and an understanding, but he just said, "Why me? Why is this happening?" And so we see a representation of just how we as Christians go through these times of suffering and say, my God, how long will I have to deal with this?
Right.
How long is this going to go on? And it says they were given a white robe, told to rest a little longer.
And I think what that does, let me stop you there.
Yeah, no, it's good.
On that verse 11,
Yeah.
there's a reason why the robe is white. It shows favorable from God.
Yep.
It shows these are my people.
Yep.
And they did it right. And I think that needs to be made sure that we mention that here.
And again, the contrast between the whites. I know this gets confusing, but
that's true.
But I mean, really, we go back to the horses, and the horses represent something entirely different. We can look at the colors for whatever reason, and kind of draw some conclusions from those.
I think it matters.
But this is a different white.
It is. It is.
It's a representation of a different thing.
Even though Jesus was white.
Yes.
And these are his people.
Yep.
The head, the body.
Yep.
It's interesting. I think there may be a reason why they all wore the same color in there, because it brings them together, and so don't get lost in that part of it. Even though we talk about and we almost shame the symbolism to death.
We do.
It's like, don't do it. But the fact is, it makes sense.
It does.
It's like a combination. Have you ever done any of those those lock away rooms?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
escape rooms.
Those escape rooms.
Yeah.
There's codes you got to figure out.
Right.
We're in a big one of those.
We are. We're in an escape room.
We're in a big one of those.
How are we gonna get out?
But the colors match. They go together.
Yeah.
You got the creatures that do this thing. You got the others that do that thing, and they work together. One has to kind of dominate over the other because that's life.
And because of the nature of this vision, it's okay that sometimes those colors represent different concepts.
That's true.
Depending on whether we're talking about good or evil.
It's like a glossary. This word means this word.
That's
that
right.
color means that color.
Yep.
And we mentioned a lot of those at the very beginning of the show. If you go back to episode 1, 2, and 3, we talked about those things.
Yeah.
numbers and colors and things like that. And so
what they all mean.
Exactly. And this is one of those things that they kind of bring us to that point.
So we've got the four horsemen that just represent the challenges living in the sinful world.
Yeah.
The fifth seal that talks to us about
the martyrs,
the hope.
The hope, for sure.
I mean, that's hope for the faithful. I mean, that's what we've got. And then
the sixth seal.
Then we get into the sixth seal, which, not to...
That Jesus breaks.
Yeah, not to ruin the party, but Judgment Day right now. So we're going to get a picture of...
Looks at things that will take place on the day of wrath, the
when
day of
he
judgment.
Opened the sixth seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, the full moon became like blood. All these images of earthly, kind of things in nature that we see happening. And the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. I just love that imagery.
It's funny.
The fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. So if you think of those verses 12 through 14, just think of the devastation of the universe that goes on, the process of everything going away.
Right.
Then the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone slave and free hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? That final sentence, that whole verse 16 and 17, really, guess what's going to happen in judgment?
That
there will not be a single person who has ever existed, exists now, will exist after us until the end of the earth, that will stand before God and go, you're not real.
That's true.
They will not exist. Those people will not exist, because it says kings of the earth, great ones, general, everybody will acknowledge this and him.
So this is the chapter. This is the point when the Bible is talking about end of days.
It's true.
This is it. This is the day of judgment.
It is one of those times.
None of us know what day that will be.
Nope.
We don't know what it's going to look like. We do know that the world will be destroyed. We do know that the dead in Christ will rise. We're gonna meet him in the sky.
Yep.
And we do know we're going to be standing on that bar on high. And I think you know, and there's a lot of references to Matthew 24. We do this a lot.
Yep.
And we need to because of the study. But in Matthew 24:36, but concerning the day and hour, no one knows.
No one knows.
Not even the angels in heaven,
Yep.
nor the Son, but the Father only.
That's right.
That's powerful because he is our God. He is the Almighty. And our salvation is not to be taken lightly because it is forever.
And an excellent point, because this verse and no other verse in Revelation, that we have some others that talk about the same thing, are intended to convey that we can pick out events
Right.
in the world around us
Sure.
that depict it.
That's it.
You're exactly right.
And there's nothing more important than where we're going to be when it comes to spending our eternity.
Yep. So we have to live that way every day, right?
That's it. Absolutely it.
Every
And that's
single
chapter
day.
6. For Les Sandifer, I'm Paul Sperlin. This has been Coffee Conversation Revelation Edition. Thank you for being with us over the study. Thank you. We're looking forward to be with you over that next cup of coffee.